The first part of a 3-part lesson, and it's all about going from standard form to factor form. So what's the format for something in standard form? A, B, X. Close. Starts with an A, and then what? B something divided? No, AX divided by B. A little closer, AX, and then what? Plus B. Okay, AX squared plus BX. Oh. Plus C. This is our standard form, okay? So everyone know that standard form of quadratics looks something like this. Of course, there can be stuff missing, but if you have a quadratic like this, and today we only focus for when A equals 1. When A is not 1, there's an added step, but we'll do that a different day. When A is 1, then you can factor it, meaning put it back into factor form, something like this, by figuring out what multiplies to C, and at the same time add to B. Okay, so I don't know, I'm gonna make one up, but it's hard to make one up on the spot, so let me think for a second. Okay. So using what I just told you, some of you haven't had the lesson yet, so that's why like pay attention especially. But the way that I like to organize my information is with this diamond method where it's A times C on top, B on the bottom. So A times C, 1 times 10, 10 goes on the top. The number in the B position is 7. I need you to think of 2 numbers that multiply to 10 and add to 7. Don't say it out loud, just think about it. Multiply to 10 and add to 7. 2 numbers, do that. What 2 numbers multiply to 10 and at the same time add to 7? 5. So then when I write it in factor form, it's going to look like this. X plus 5 and X plus 2. Okay, questions on that? We're going to do a couple more examples. Anyone else need to take a picture before I take the screen away? Because that's how you set it up for this method. They call it like the AC method or the diamond method. It's A times C. Right now, A is just 1. But yes, any questions on that method? We're going to practice it with a couple random problems. I'm going to call on some of you, so if you look like you're not paying attention, I'll make sure to call on you respectfully. Okay. So here's a few random problems. If you set it up the way that I showed you, I think that's a good way to organize your information. We're looking for numbers that multiply to the top. So A times C, 1 times negative 16. And then add to the bottom. The number in the B position is 6. So think about it, don't say it. Think about it. 2 numbers that multiply to negative 16 and at the same time add 6. Think about it. Okay, John, what are 2 numbers that multiply to negative 16 and at the same time add to 6? Okay, can you give me some numbers, some ways that I can multiply to 16 and I'll help you problem solve? So 16, we want to multiply to 16. What are some numbers that do that? 8 times what multiplies to 16? Okay, so let's work with that. There's also other numbers that multiply to 16, like 4 times 4, 16 times 1. So let's start with the 8 and 2. Now, if it multiplies to a negative 16, that means one of them has to be negative. At the same time, it needs to add to 6. So which one would have to be negative? Good. There's only one combination of numbers that'll work, and you'll have to play around with the minus sign to make that happen. So then I write my final answer as x plus 8 and x minus 2. You keep the sign that it had to be to make it happen. There's no way I could rearrange 4 and 4 to do that, or 16 and 1. You just have to find the combination. Does that make sense? Okay, let's try another. Someone else will be ready. So numbers that multiply to -72 and at the same time add to -14. Let's think about it. All right, anyone think they know it? Dan? I know the name. So I agree, it does multiply to 72, but I know that can't be the combination because there's no way I can play around with the negative to make it work for this.
14 and 3 likes.
Well, 14 and 3 would not work, so what are some other ways you can multiply to get 72? Seventy-two and 1 for sure will not work. Let's see what 72 divided by 2 is, I'm pretty sure that won't work either. Yes. 12 times 6. I don't think I'm good at my multiples of 12, so let me check that, okay? Now, if I were to plug this in, is there any way I can play around with a negative, because it multiplies to give me a negative? Is there any way I can play around with the negative to make it equal -14? Can I ask? For that combination? Okay, so not that one either, unfortunately. I did 72 divided by 2, but that definitely won't work, 36 and 2.
Well, it's not good at 14.
Yeah, it has to add to -14.
So it has to do multiple things back to
Okay, I found the numbers that work and. So if you're having trouble like we are, I'm just kind of in my calculator doing like, okay, 72 divided by 2, 36 and 2 do not work. 72 divided by 3, those numbers don't work either. But when I do 72 divided by 4, I get 4 times 18 gives me 72. Which one would have to be negative to add to -14? Good. So then for this one, it's x plus 4 and x minus 8 for my factor form. Didn't mean for that one to be as hard, but you see the picture. There's only 2 numbers that make it work. And depending on whether it's positive or negative, you'll have to play around with the negative sign to see what it has to be and then write your number in factor form. Okay, any questions on that? So that, I think, and I know some of you haven't had the lesson yet, I think that's enough to help you with your practice, but if you need help as you go, please let me know. And if you also have questions on yesterday's practice, you can let me know too. Always check in, but, you know, you can always ask if you get them.